It's going to take years before something new that can unite black people and white people emerge. Because the ANC has committed serious crimes against black people and against South Africans, all South Africans. What if you look at how white people, the English first, and secondly the Afrikaners, how they turned themselves around from conditions of poverty to become middle class and wealthy. Education was at the center of that process. The ANC has collapsed public schools in townships, has collapsed public schools in rural areas. It has actually collapsed universities. The quality of our universities has declined under the ANC. So what?
Guys, Prince Mashele is coming back again with a really powerful statement, actually arguing that the ANC actually destroyed what probably the whites, I think this is now the whites during the apartheid regime or the period of colonialism, have systematically destroyed what the whites have built in South Africa, and actually also argues that, the ANC has actually committed crimes against South Africans. Let's quickly listen to what he means by this really powerful, tense statement, and I'll be back for an analysis.
The ANC's death must be mourned, regretted, and celebrated at the same time. Why must it be regretted? And you'll see how I'm answering your question. It must be regretted because historically, the ANC is the only political party in the whole history of South Africa that united black people. And you may take this lightly, by the way. It's hugely important. So a black person in KwaMhlabu Lingana, in KZN, and a black person in Chidimbini in Venda, or Zirast in the Northwest, or Nkomati Port in Mpumalanga. What is it that made them to feel that they belong to one thing? Politically, it actually has been the ANC. There is no other party that managed to do that for black people in the history of black people. A political party that made all blacks, it didn't matter where you are, feel that you belong to one thing. Now, when you remove that thing, you are actually living political chaos for black people. Going forward, it's going to be extremely difficult for black people to feel and believe that they belong to one thing. As we speak, there is no political party in South Africa, as the ANC, as I said, is dead, that does that. The DA does not make black people feel that they belong to one thing. The EFF does not make black people feel that they belong to one thing. They may be supported by a section of blacks, but not the whole of black society feel that they belong to one thing. The MK, in the main, animates Zulus in KZN. There is an attempt I can see at the level of leadership to bring people like Floyd, Dali, and all of them. But the MK hasn't reached that level that the ANC had reached in terms of legitimacy among black people. So that's why I'm saying the death of the ANC, on the one hand, must be regretted. It's going to take years before something new that can unite black people and white people emerge. Why must it be celebrated? This is the other hand. It must be celebrated because the ANC has committed serious crimes against black people and against South Africans, all South Africans. What are the crimes of the ANC? Let's start with black people. The biggest crime that the ANC has committed against black people is education, public education. If you look at how white people, the English first, and secondly the Afrikaners, how they turned themselves around from conditions of poverty to become middle class and wealthy. Education was at the center of that process. They built public schools for their children and made sure that their children received top education. One of the public schools I'm talking about is exactly this place where we are sitting. Vets was built by the English, supported by the mining industry right here in Johannesburg. To do what? They meant to educate the children of the English. That's why the Afrikaners later, they went next door to build the Rand Afrikaans University. To do what? To do exactly what the English had been doing through vets for their own Afrikaner children. The ANC has collapsed public schools in townships, has collapsed public schools in rural areas. It has actually collapsed universities. The quality of our universities has declined under the ANC. So what has that done? That has expanded the reservoir of black people who are uneducated, who are unemployable, and who are hopeless. So that's the first crime committed by the ANC. So when proper history is written, and by the way, like Churchill, Churchill said history would be kind to himself because he was going to write it himself, and he has written it. I'm going to write this history, so I'm not going to leave it to some amateurish historian. The second failure of the ANC is this: is the failure to add a significant component to the South African economy, a component that would provide work for black people. So again, let's go back to the English. What did they do in South Africa in relation to the economy? They built mines. At the top of those mines, you found the English and the Jews, by the way. They were the owners and the managers of those mines. Below them, the petty bourgeoisie, again, the English and the Jews. That's how the English eventually in South Africa dug themselves as a collective out of poverty. And at the bottom, underground, the people who were doing the hard work, they were dying underground, were blacks. Afrikaners, what did they do? They built parastatals. Your Escoms of this world, your Telcoms of this world, your E-scores of this world. To do what? To provide employment to the Afrikaners. So an Afrikaner would be found at a robot begging. He would be picked up by an average middle-class Afrikaner and say, no, you are embarrassing us. You need to go and work. And this chap would be taken to Telkom and be given a job. And a black fellow would be taught that this is your new boss, you must teach him work. So the Afrikaners built parastatals in order to provide employment to their own people. And there was also a component of industry, by the way, financed through the activities of the Bruther Bond. Your rupees of this world, by the way, the first rupee was financed through arrangements involving the Bruther Bond. Now, let's come to the ANC, which is the sin it committed. What is it that the ANC has built that provides employment to black people? That's the question. Oh, look at the previous 30 years. The ANC has built nothing. You know what it has done? It has destroyed the little that the whites had built. You come from Tembisa. You know what I'm talking about. The factories around Isando, the factories around Kempton Park, which used to be bustling manufacturing centers. A lot of them have actually closed down. I come from Mpumalanga. I live in a township called Mukhuhlu. There used to be an industrial site in Mukhuhlu. You want to cry when you see that industrial site today. Nothing is happening there. And what I'm telling you, South Africans know across the country has happened. So the ANC has committed a huge sin. At the same time, it has enriched a few of its cadres. The first band was the band of Sakima Kozo, that group. Bulelani Ngcuka. They are very rich. Are they creating employment for millions of black people? Show me these jobs. So that's the second, and that's economic, the second crime. The last crime that the ANC has committed is to confirm racism, that racism historically has been correct. That white people, what they have been saying throughout history, that black people cannot govern. Black people are backward. They are uncivilizable. The ANC has confirmed it. This stuff, it's heartbreaking. the ANC, for the sins it has committed, must never be forgiven by black people. It is the only party that enjoy the kind of overwhelming support from black people. And what did it do? It squandered our support. It made us to be the laughing stock of white people, but it also made black people to be the laughing stock of the world. The blacks of South Africa were the last hope, by the way, in the world. Historically, black people have been victims of racism. And the theory was simple. Black people are half human. They are not civilizable. They cannot govern themselves. And if you look across the world, by the way, you will struggle to find a country with significant global clout that is governed by black people, that is making technological advancements the way China, for example, has proven whites wrong. Remember, whites in the world have also believed that Chinese people, Japanese people, the yellow peril, can't govern themselves. They're uncivilizable. But the Asians, the Chinese, the first was the Japanese, by the way, turning around from 1868, the Meiji dynasty. They turned themselves around. In 1905, Japan defeated a European power, Russia, 1905, militarily, defeated Russia. And it was celebrated by the rest of Asia. And the Asians realized, actually, whites are not superior. Black people in South Africa, the ANC has said to white people, you have been correct to say we cannot govern ourselves. I was listening to the radio yesterday. The ANC government can't even provide clean linen in a hospital called Chris Hani Baragwanath. Chris Hani must be turning in his grave, by the way, when he sees what is happening in a hospital that is named after. Clean linen. What about building a factory? So those are the sins of the African National Congress as we close this year and we say this has been a historic year.
Sure. Yeah, guys. So I think it's really unfortunate to hear these things. For me, being what you would call naturally a black, but I'm not South African. I'm Nigerian, and that's why. Growing up in Nigeria, we had really different realities, you see. But I think it's really unfortunate to hear these things that Prince Mashele says, especially him always identify that he's black, and he's saying these things, and to the risk of being called a sellout or a non-conformer to the black consciousness movement, so to speak. But sometimes some truths have to really be said, and. I think this whole argument for the emancipation of blacks, the emancipation of coloreds, the emancipation of whites, really has to go beyond the whole call for a sellout, because South Africa is actually a proof of that fact of what possibility humanity can actually achieve when all the races work together. All right. So instead of trying to call a truth teller a sellout, so to speak, I think it's really important to listen to what Mashele says is actually a depressing experience for all South Africans, not just whites, blacks, or colored, but all South Africans, because South Africa had the potential and still has the potential to be one of the greatest nations in this world, but under the kind of leadership it actually stuck with. I think this explains why there's been an exodus of many South Africans. I think I was listening to a popular black South African who actually emigrated to the United States, I think about 6 or 7 years ago. And she actually argued that, one of the gifts she would actually wish to give to black South African women is the safety that living outside South Africa provides. And when she sees, the escape, so to speak, from South Africa as something that's in terms of safety. She never felt safe in South Africa going forward. And safety now moves even beyond the physical safety, but in terms of economic safety, prospects for job, and all of that, many blacks, like Prince Mashele argues, do not see a hope. And I would dare to say also that many whites do not see a hope. That's why I encounter a lot of white South Africans when I travel around the world, to the Scandinavia, to Germany. I see a lot of white South Africans who really cannot identify or see a future for them being of, even as we usually, as is has actually been argued, of being a white skin, probably white privileged, but they do not see a future in South Africa. That speaks to the kind of society that South Africa has actually kind of like degenerated into. And Prince Mashele has these really sad words to the point where he actually argues that, you know, blacks should never forgive the ANC, that blacks should never ever forgive the ANC for what it has done to black South Africa, but also not just black South Africa, all South Africans. And I think those are really unfortunate statements to make for a nation that has this much great potential. And if you hear correctly, you hear Prince Mashele arguing that, you know, one of the things that rose the Afrikaner and the white community in South Africa is actually investment in schools. I think, you know, the British actually had some really massive investment in education, you know, to train some of the, you know, parts of the white populace, and the Afrikaner followed that suit. But the ANC really didn't do that. Rather, you know, I think there were policies it put in place that led to the demise of the public schools, I think in the townships and all that. Which was really a disaster according to him, and actually argues, and he argues that this has actually really caused a major impact on the yeah. So if you listen to Prince Mashele, he actually argues that, you know, the British and the Afrikaners, they actually made really massive you know, investment in education in schools, but rather than the ANC follow that suit, you know, it actually put in policies that led to the demise of the black township school, and actually now leading to a, you know, mass you know, populace of black majority that are uneducated. Many do not see a hope in education, many, and leading to now a radicalization, increase in crime, and, you know, all these kinds of things. And so he's really not happy with the ANC. He's really not happy with the policies of the ANC, how the ANC has governed, you know, all this while. And really powerful words. But I really don't know what else to say. It's a really chilling interview he really had with DJ Spoo, and I'm still thinking a lot about many of the things he actually spoke about. But anyway, I don't know, what do you guys think about this speech here by Prince Mashele? Share your thoughts in the comments.